Let me begin with the title for my overall presentation this evening. JFK and the Cold War, Deception, Intrigue, and the Struggle for Power. This is part one. The Kennedys, King, and the race issue, the election of 1960. Now, in popular wisdom, the shaping force in Dr. King's thinking was Mahatma Gandhi. However, it was the eminent American theologist Reinhold Niebuhr who fundamentally shaped King's religious views. Niebuhr's interest in Gandhi, however, was not lost on Dr. King. Niebuhr said this of Gandhi: his methods were a type of coercion offering the best chances for a strategic instrument for oppressed groups, unable to develop enough power to set against their oppressors. Now, the source of King's coercive nonviolent strategy was Niebuhr's book, Moral Man and Immoral Society. It was published in 1932, when King was just 3 years old. That work was the beginning of the end of classical liberalism in American theology. Niebuhr successfully attacked the social gospel's premise that the modern advance of reason could eliminate social evils. Niebuhr argued that there was no evidence that human beings became less predatory as they became better educated. Niebuhr was focused on coercive nonviolence. Nonviolent coercion and resistance, he said, is a type of coercion which offers the largest opportunities for a harmonious relationship with the moral and rational factors in social life. It doesn't destroy the process of a moral and rational adjustment of interests in the course of resistance. Significantly and interestingly, Niebuhr applied this strategy to the race issue in America. He said, however large the number of individual white men who will identify themselves completely with the Negro cause, the white race in America will not admit the Negro to equal rights if it is not forced to do so. Upon that point, one may speak with a dogmatism which all history justifies. Now let me turn to the subject of this part of my presentation, the 1960 election, and 14 days that changed history. There was a causal chain of 6 race-related events that led to JFK's November 1960 election. And each one of these events had to occur in order that the next event could take place. If any of these events had failed to take place, Kennedy would not have been elected president. There would have been no new frontier, no Keynesian economics, no increased minimum wage, no depressed area development, no proposals for Medicare and increased Social Security benefits, no Peace Corps and no Alliance for Progress. On the other hand, it's almost certain that America would have gone to war in Cuba, Laos, and in Vietnam. Now, the first of these 6 providential events that all happened at the right time in the right order was on 17 October 1960. Kennedy had scuttled a proposed meeting with Dr. King after King said he would have to make a pro forma offer to meet with Nixon too. On 19 October, as a result of that, King was then available to participate in his first student sit-in in Atlanta, Georgia, where he was arrested. Now, this picture isn't one of what the sit-in that King was at, but it's typical, and it's hard to look at what they put themselves through. The next 2 events both occurred on the 26th of October. The first one at 3 a.m. in the morning. King found himself chained to the floor of a police car for hours as he was being transferred to another county, DeKalb County, to Reidsville Federal Penitentiary to be put on a chain gang. On all this was for an insignificant traffic violation. Later that day, the next event happened. At 10 o'clock in the morning, JFK made a sympathy call to Coretta King to console her about Dr. King's terrible situation and offering to do whatever he could to help. The next event occurred on 27 October. Robert Kennedy made an angry call to Judge Mitchell and secured King's release on bail from Reidsville Penitentiary. The next day, on 28 October, the next event took place. The covert so-called blue bomb scheme was launched. Millions of pamphlets would be distributed to Black churches on Sunday, 6 November, 2 days before the election. Kennedy's campaign civil rights team carried out their scheme against Bobby Kennedy's orders. There were Harris Wofford, Lewis Martin, and Sergeant Shriver, and they violated, among other things, Bobby's gag order not to publicize JFK's call to credit King among the Black media. So the team took a daring gamble with time running out. The pamphlets titled, quote, "No Comment Nixon versus a Candidate with a Heart, Senator Kennedy," were published on cheap blue paper, earning the name the Blue Bomb. It took me many years to get an authentic copy, but this is one. This is exactly what it looked like, the Blue Bomb. And so at the last minute, MLK was able to endorse Kennedy. Out of prison, back in Atlanta just in time, Dr. King was free to add his thanks to JFK on the Blue Bomb. He said, quote, "I am deeply indebted to Senator Kennedy, who served as a great force in making my release possible. I am convinced he will seek to exercise the power of his office to fully implement the civil rights plank of his party's platform." And so the team continued to carry out their scheme against Bobby's orders. The pamphlets were shipped across the country on Greyhound buses from a dummy committee out of sight of the press and kept secret from the Kennedy brothers until after the election. Everywhere in the African-American community, the pamphlets were distributed outside of the churches after worship services. And then the amazing outcome, a come from behind win, surprise win. John F. Kennedy became the President of the United States. Then came the shocking election results themselves. Although the Electoral College was 303 to 219 for JFK, he won the popular vote by just 112,000 votes, a margin of 0.17%. But the single most amazing statistic about Kennedy's victory was his 40% margin among African-American voters. Now, in 1956, the previous election, the Black vote had split 60-40 for the Republican candidate. In 1960, the vote had split 70-30 for the Democratic candidate. This 30% shift produced victory margins for JFK in 7 key states: Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, North Carolina, and South Carolina. And then there was a bright light in the land. After winning the Democratic nomination, JFK had assembled 29 task force in domestic and foreign policy who would lead his administration after his victory in 1960. They would come into place, of course, after the inauguration in January 1961. JFK listened to Keynesian brain trusters like John Galbraith, Paul Samuelson, and Walter Heller. They sought to lower interest rates to spur the economy, running a surplus to fight inflation and a deficit to fight recession, and using the government instead of private enterprise to increase investment. The new frontier was for Main Street instead of Wall Street. And so the light of the new frontier included Medicaid, Medicare, increased Social Security benefits for the aged, minimum wage increases, low interest rates for small businesses. It also included unemployment insurance extensions, early payment of veterans' life insurance dividends, low-income housing, food surplus distribution, investment in natural resources, pollution control, watershed development, and in foreign policy, the Peace Corps, the Alliance for Progress, and above all, peace instead of war. And then the light faded. John Kennedy never thought that his vision for a better country, for all that he wanted to do to help Americans, and for all that he planned to do to bring peace to a world divided by the Cold War, that this vision could be threatened by the only part of the US government that he had let stay in place, the national security state, especially the CIA and the Pentagon and their plans for world hegemony. And then came the storm. JFK spent the last 3 years of his life struggling against those entrenched enablers of neocolonialism and economic exploitation of Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, and the Far East. JFK's ship quickly ran into the crosswinds of domestic white racism and the righteous aspirations of African Americans and his inability to control the American national security state. And then came the darkness. Just when Kennedy realized that the truth was more important than his own political future, he spoke out in the summer of 1963 for civil rights and for peace instead of war in the Cold War. And then he was cut down. And so it would be also for his brother Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. They fought for civil rights and peace, and they all paid the ultimate price.